How well have you been accepted by all the teenagers and
Oh,
friends?
God, good.
That's the thing you down at the state park.
I was here before they were, right? So it's not like I just skating and go back and that Roosevelt guy. It's like I was there. When they showed up, like we all get along because we've all been skating together. It's not like I just started. Like I've been doing this for 35 years, and I'm just one of them. I just happen to have gray hair.
Hey!星期四咧 Thursday 咧，要好早出門口我哋，因為爸爸要去喺做嘢嗰度要出西嗰個。Can you help me?
Here, and you heard him refer to those it's now a one-footed front-side road where the front piece of the middle kicked out and then
Yeah. Pourquoi? Yeah.
Rishi Sunak will target wavering voters today with further warnings about what he calls an unchecked Labour supermajority. Sir Keir Starmer, who said he wants people to be better off in 5 years' time if Labour wins the general election on Thursday. Data obtained by BBC News show that more than 61,000 people have student debts of £100,000 or more. New government figures also show that the average loan balance in England, when someone starts repayments, is now over £48,000. More than 400 environmental protesters have been named in court orders restricting demonstrations in places such as oil terminals and petrol stations. Businesses and public bodies have imposed civil injunctions against groups including Extinction Rebellion and Just the Point.
Caroline, thank you very much indeed. We've spoken to the Lib Dems and Reform parties on this programme today. Ready, let's turn to the Greens. The Green Party wants to transform British education. It's announcing a package of measures that it says will improve the learning environment for both students and teachers. The measures amount to over £30 billion and include the scrapping of Ofsted and tuition fees. Let's speak to the co-leader of the Green Party, Adrian Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Given us the possibility at least that your party is not in government come Friday, let's just start with the principle at least so we know where you are before we interrogate the policy. What do you think education is for? What's the point of it?
I think education is about supporting our young people to be rounded individuals, to gain the skills that they need to support them in all aspects of life, including, of course, in their working life, but in all aspects of life. And so one of the things we're proposing is that we need to have a more rounded approach to education, which of course includes core skills in English and maths. But we do think that the exam factory type approach that the National Education Union has described results in too many young people feeling under a lot of pressure, including at a very young age, which is why we've suggested replacing SATs with less formal testing and more continuous assessments. And we also think there should be a greater emphasis on a wider range of subjects. There's more emphasis on vocational subjects, arts and music, and humanities, the sort of things that make the rounded young people being able to play their full role in society.
Okay, and you've got a number of ambitions in terms of how you'd like to spend about £30 billion, just a little bit more. So just to break it down for you, that's an extra £8 billion for schools, including a £2 billion payout for teachers, £2.5 billion to tackle the concrete rat scandal, £5 billion for special needs, £3 billion for sixth formers, and £12 billion in skills and lifelong learning. Where does all that lovely cash come from?
Well, that's absolutely right, and those figures are based on our engagement with education bodies and other experts looking at what level of funding is needed, and indeed the National Education Union has said that our funding, and we're alone in parties in this election as far as I can see, our funding is starting to restore the significant cuts that there have been. So it's about getting us back to the level of funding that happened.
Where's it come from, the money?
And we've set out in our manifesto exactly how we fund our proposals both for education but also for restoring the NHS and for the transition to the green economy. And we would be willing to ask the richest in society, the multi-millionaires, the billionaires, to pay modestly more in tax. I'm talking about a 1% tax.
What do they want to
with
pay?
over 10 million in wealth and assets. A modest
What do they want to pay?
that could raise tens of billions during the course of this next Parliament, or investing in a better education system so that our teachers aren't having to choose between books and dialects, but do actually have the resources that are needed to support our children, as well as ensuring that teachers are paid a fair salary so we can keep people in the profession, which is often extremely pressured, and where we're losing far too many talented teachers and putting off people who want to make that vocation from choosing to make that career.
And on top of those, that 30 million, you also separately want to scrap tuition fees, is that right?
Indeed, because
How much would that cost?
that would be around another 25 billion.
So it's 55. So that 1% increase in tax on people who have over £10 million, presumably mean that in assets rather than income, because not many people learn that in income. But people who have more than £10 million in assets, the 1% increase would get you to that 55 billion, do you think?
Not on its own it wouldn't, no. We've set out in our fully costed manifesto, which includes a range of proposals for how we would bring in more tax into the system.
Don't you think it is that easy to raise that much tax? Because I'm thinking of
The Westminster that travelled through England back in the day. It was for so many different reasons, so many different motivations. And back in that between the war was trying to establish themselves as a cricket nation. And then obviously that 1950s victory, I read a lot about it. The first time the West Indies beat England and the sort of carnival that they were having on the streets of England. It's just historic. And all the other teams in 90 that competition, but against England,
well, and West Indies are coming here. You're partly in this country because West Indies have got some test matches here. How do you feel about their prospects this summer and about the state of West Indies cricket generally?
Well, I'd start with first of all, the state of West Indies. There's a lot to be done. And, being a small nation, 5 million people living in so many different islands, it's very tough. I do feel for the administrators. I do feel that if we're going to sort of unify against the big powers of the India, look at India, Australia, England, it's very, very tough. And I'm amazed that, 30, 40 years ago that we dominated the world, even though we were in that state. This present rescue team, I believe, coming out of the success that they had in the last test in Australia, it leaves a lot of optimism. But we still got to face a different team. England's playing very aggressive cricket. Maybe the tables have turned where we were dominant, Griffiths 56 for 100 in Antigua, and David's we played, stifled England out of victories. This is an England team now that can beat anybody in the world. We are still very young team, but I think it's promising, and I think that this could be an upset in one or two of the matches.
Well, we shall see. Brian Lara, the book is riveting. It's Anecdote Rich. It's called Lara, the England Chronicles, and it's happening. Brian, good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Brian, the more would like to take you into another studio and talk to you just for another 5 or 6 minutes. Sadly, no time.
Thank you.
The podcast will be good. Thank you so much for being this. Real privilege. 5 to 9 now. Let us just pick up one important factual thing from earlier. Because Tim Brown was talking to us from the Liberal Democrats and told us that the regulator Ofwat had approved Thames Water paying its shareholders a dividend of £150 million and used it to make an argument against Ofwat to create a new regulator. Well, they've been in touch with Ofwat, saying they have not signed off on that dividend. They tell us that they wait to see what the company discloses to them and have new powers to act against paying dividends that don't reflect how companies perform for their customers or indeed for the environment. It's coming up now to 4 minutes to 9. Quick last word now on that data that we've been commenting on throughout the programme that reveals that almost 1.8 million people now have at least £50,000 of student debt. These figures from the Student Loans Company also show that more than 61,000 have balances of above 100,000. Another 50 show 200,000. We're joined by the founder of MoneySavingsExpert.com, financial journalist Martin Lewis. Morning to you, Martin.
Good morning.
Now, I think you've long argued, haven't you, that we're actually looking at the wrong thing here. The size of debt sounds scary, alarms people. These figures seem extraordinary, but it's not really the point in your view.
No, and in fact, my buttocks clenched slightly when I heard you were doing this story, because it's this type of story that enables the government to double the cost of student finance without anybody noticing. Because student finance for the vast majority of students is not about what you owe but what you earn. You repay 9% of everything above a threshold. For most of the students who'll be in your survey, they'll be on Plan 2, which is England Starters 2012 to 2022. You repay 9% of everything above £27,295. So let's just make this simple. Let's say you owe £20,000 and you earn £30,000. Well, you're going to repay 9% of everything above the threshold. That's 250 quid a year. Now let's say you owe £50,000 and you earn £30,000. What do you repay? 9% of everything above the threshold, about 250 quid a year. Let's say they put tuition fees up to £1 million a year and you owe £3 million. What do you repay? 9% above the threshold, 250 quid a year. And the point is, the only thing what you owe dictates is whether you will clear in full before it's white, which for those on the Plan 2 loans is 30 years. And the stats are only 23% fully reclear. The whole way we frame student loans is because Tony Blair was too scared to call it a tax. It really is effectively a limited form of graduate tax. So he called it a loan because that would be better, because he'd made a promise of no new taxes.
So are you saying for a future
call this a graduate contribution system? They don't call it a loan. And the problem, and just to finish that first point, because of all this framing about debt and going on about debt, rather than actually both saying this is quite an expensive additional tax, the government have dropped the repayment threshold, which is a bit like fiscal drag, which means students on the new loans who started since 2023 are going to repay a lot more because they repay for 40 years, and they've got away with that without anyone screaming. Instead, we're screaming about £100,000 of debt, which is irrelevant for the vast majority of people who have it.
Nobody makes it clearer than you, but I just really want to reinforce this in the last minute that you've got, Martin, with us, which is you're saying focusing on the debt is just a total distraction. Focus on the rate at which people pay back. And what would that mean if they listened to you for a future government who wanted to change it?
Well, first of all, you'd call the name a graduate contribution system. You would completely rename it. The biggest problem in student finance is actually the loans are too small. Students in England on their maintenance loans have had below home inflation rises, which is pricing out those people, especially from non-university backgrounds, which is a real threat to social inequality. The whole way we frame this discussion is wrong. We are student loan illiterate. It's misnamed, misframed, misunderstood, and we need to be very careful. I wish I could do an hour with you to explain it properly, so people can go and do their reading on it.
In 10 more seconds, you will know, because lots of people come to your advice, that the size of debt scares people, even if it isn't real.
That's why, along with the Russell Group, we campaign to change the way people have statements. Many people try and overpay unnecessarily when overpaying won't actually help them, won't mean they pay a penny less in future. The whole, especially Frank 2 loans, where the vast majority of people will not clear in full. Only the highest earning graduates should focus and look at the actual interest.
We'll get you back to that hour. We're going to do that, Martin, thank you.
That's it from us. Student Avenue is up next to the Life Science. Thanks so much for listening.
BBC News at 9 o'clock. President Biden says the US Supreme Court has set a dangerous precedent by ruling that Donald Trump has partial immunity from criminal prosecution. Mr. Trump is facing numerous charges relating to alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election result. A former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, David Frum, told the Today programme that although the court's decision applies to official acts carried out by anyone who's held high office, it seems to be tailored for Donald Trump.
They said, look, we are writing a special case that basically says this is a get-out-of-free card for Donald Trump, and it won't apply to other presidents because no one will have the highly specific facts that the Supreme Court itemizes in this case.
Sir Keir Starmer has insisted a big Labour majority would be better for the country, as the Conservatives continue to urge voters not to hand Labour a blank cheque. Politicians are reinforcing their party's key messages, with 2 days to go until the election. Official figures show that almost 1.8 million people who've studied in the UK have at least £50,000 of student debt. Around 60,000 owe more than £100,000. The Student Loans Company says people with higher than average balances may be in receipt of several student loan products. 2 reports suggest cost of living pressures are beginning to ease. The rate of food price increases has slowed. It was at 2.5% in June, down from more than 3% in May. The price of petrol also fell last month, but the motoring organisation the RAC says drivers are still paying too much to fill up. More than 400 environmental protesters have been named in civil injunctions aimed at restricting demonstrations in places such as oil terminals and petrol stations. Businesses and public bodies have brought the measures against groups including Extinction Rebellion, Insulate Britain and Just Stop Oil. Andy Murray is due on centre court at Wimbledon today, but still hasn't confirmed whether he'll play. He's been recovering from back surgery and has already said this will be his last appearance at the tournament. BBC News.
BBC Radio 4. How can we combat treatment-resistant depression? Find out from Insight Garden Working. Now to our committee about this is a story of a lesser-known genetic disorder that now, over 30 years, that people dedicated researchers have revolutionized health for those with the condition. In the Life Science.
Hello, today I'd like you to put on your metaphorical radio hats and see if you recognize what condition these symptoms may relate to. I'm using to a height and elongated fingers, flat hands, deep joints, icing issues, and heart problems. Well done if you identify them as indicators of what Martha had syndrome. This is a condition that affects the body's connective tissues controlling the fiber, and that can become a hard to give tissue factor antibodies. It was called
1 in 3,000 people across Europe, more likely 1 in 5,000 worldwide. The disease itself was described in 1895 by Professor Marfan, a French pediatrician, who saw a little girl on the beach who had very long, thin arms and legs, and also heart disease and lung disease. So this first description became the first case. And we all stand on the shoulders of scientists and common cause. So 100 years later, we managed to put all the facts together. It is a major cardiac disorder, and the cause of early death because the connective tissue, which holds us together, also is an important constituent of the aortic wall. In the eye, it attaches the lens to the eyeball itself. So if deficient, the lens just floats about and cannot focus the light rays properly. And in the skeleton, it permits excessive growth by being weak. We all know about growth hormones that make us grow, but what stops us growing? And we think that the connective tissue strength is one of the limits on human growth.
Now that we know much more about this syndrome, how is it treated?
Well, first of all, you have to pick it up. And then we can treat this patient when we know he or she needs treatment. So you have to examine the eyes, the height, and the joints once a year. Then you have to look at the heart once a year with an echocardiogram. That's just a harmless ultrasound picture and measure how wide the aorta is. We know at a certain cutoff point we have to offer surgery so that it doesn't tear. And now we have a new operation called a wrap. The heart is wrapped from the outside to keep it strong.
Well, as I mentioned in the introduction there, your whole interest in markers was sparked in the 1980s when you were working at Christ Hospital in London. Talk me through that encounter.
Yes, I was doing general genetic counseling, but with a special interest in heart disease. And a young man came with his wife, and he said, "We've just got married. I have Marfan syndrome. We want to have children, but we don't want to have Marfan syndrome. Can you help us?" And I said, "I'm very sorry. I understand your predicament, but we only have prenatal testing for 2 or 3 conditions at this point. We must know the cause." And we don't know the cause. And that night at dinner, I said to my husband, who's also a doctor, "I wasn't much help today. I'm really quite sad about that." So he said, "Well, why don't you set out to find the cause of Marfan syndrome?" And that gave me the courage to go back to my professor the next day and ask him, could I do a research project on Marfan syndrome? And bless his heart, he said yes.
And we're going to come to your life in London in a few minutes, but Sharpie listeners would have realised that your accent is Canadian. You're born in Toronto. What was it like?
Oh, I loved it. There was a freedom in the space. We enjoyed the snow, the ice. When there's enough of it, you can do something with it. You know, you can skate on the ice and build a snow fort. And just having space. I did a lot of canoeing in northern Ontario. And you could stand on a rock and say, I think I'm the first person to stand here ever. I find it difficult in England to find any such spot. Because there have been so many explorations and mappings and so forth. So I do miss that.
You were the second of 4 children with 2 sisters and a brother, and your father was a professional photographer.
Yes, he didn't intend to be. I think if the Depression hadn't come along and he hadn't got married at a young age and had to have a job, he probably would have gone to university and studied physics. But needs must, and he turned his interest in chemistry into an occupation by becoming a commercial photographer. And he helped found CAPAC, which is the Canadian Association of Photographers. Set up a course, taught, and of course we were always pulled down to act as free models if he needed children in his adverts.
I gather he was also very musical.
Yes, indeed. He played the organ from an early age. The house was always full of music, especially Bach. And we had to like it, even on a Sunday morning when we wanted to sleep in. We all had piano lessons, but I was especially interested and studied piano and organ eventually.
When I studied in New York, I bought a Steinway piano, and I brought that to England with me, so our children have learned on it.
And grandchildren as well.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, I've been looking out for the music genes in the grandchildren. And the littlest one sings all the time. I think I shall leave her my Steinway.
Your mother had trained as a nurse.
Yes, indeed, and her mother before her.
Right.
So we learned early on nursing techniques, and she taught us really how to feel and act towards people. My father taught us the academic approach. So it was a good blend.
So, but both parents had an influence on your decision then to study medicine. You decided you wanted to be a doctor by the age of 14. You did well at school, and in 1962, you got a place at the University of Toronto to study medicine. What was the university life like?
I didn't live on campus, so I think I missed a lot. But my father said quite rightly, I'm giving you a room at home. Why should I have to pay for another room on campus? You know, especially with 4 of us to put through university. I still don't know how he did it. And the first 2 years was pre-medicine, and then 4 years of medicine. But in those days, we weren't exposed to patients until the last 2 years of the 6. And nowadays, of course, the students meet patients in the first week of training. It's much more involving and exciting.
Well, in the summer of 1966, you started an internship at Vancouver General Hospital. A year later, you became a pediatric resident there. And although you loved the work, this was really your first opportunity to live independently. So you decided to make the most of this by taking some time off from your training to travel the world.
Yes, for the first time I was earning a living. I went to the authorities and I said I'd like to take 2 months off to tour Europe. And they said, well, you realize that your training will then be deficient and you will owe us 2 months. So I said, fine. To this day, I still owe them the 2 months training, but it enabled me to fly from Vancouver to Amsterdam and then go by train and foot across Europe to Greece, where I was in the middle of...
A few months ahead of the 2016 US election, Yoel starts seeing other posts that break the company's rules. But there's something strange about them. A number of Russian accounts had been caught by my team and by others at Twitter and had been summarily banned. The note that was left on those accounts was permanently suspend.
You stepped up, I think, for it.
Performance is smoother than butter melted in a hot toast. Now this track is the ultimate pre-game anthem. It's got a beat that hits harder than that morning espresso and sin. It's so electric.
Get free every day for the same hour.
Get match Not to get better than this collaboration. This track ignites a rush of nostalgia and euphoria. This wasn't just a song, it was an anthem.
all your support.
I think I've got to go for Molly.
You don't have to go for Molly.
各位正常嚟，大家好，我係明仔。我哋早排出咗條片講人類上太空登月嘅歷史，點知下面就好多 comment 話呢一壇嘢其實係美國自編自導自演嘅一場大龍鳳，豪言話登月從來都冇發生過添。究竟係咪真呢？今日就同大家拆解一下啦。點解咁多人質疑登月造假呢？陰謀論者提出咗啲咩理據呢？究竟登月係鐵證如山啦，抑或係一場世紀大騙案呢
？Apollo 11 has more impact on people's imagination than any such enterprise in man.
69年7月，幾千年嘅登月美夢由天方夜譚變成歷史。全球6億5千萬人透過電視直播，望住岩士堂代表人類喺另一個星球留低咗腳印。
One giant leap for mankind. Neil Armstrong, Apollo 11 commander, first man on the moon.
當世界仲為呢一項人類尋佢慶祝緊嘅時候，坊間就開始有人嗌住啦：呢一個史上第一，究竟有幾多成真呢？呢啲質疑聲浪咧，70年代開始就越煲越大啦。到咗76年，一個曾經幫手設計 Saturn V 火箭引擎嘅技術人員比爾海辛出版咗呢一本書，將所有佢認為登月有可疑嘅地方整
煙塵浪，自此就成為咗陰謀論嘅基礎啦。好啦，咁喺佢同埋一眾陰謀論者嘅眼中嘅真相又係點樣嘅咧？
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
個故事就咁嘅。60年代，總統甘迺迪就 set 咗一個好大嘅目標，不出呢10年將人類送上月球，徹底咁喺太空競賽打贏蘇聯。但係 NASA 好早就意識到咧，以佢哋當刻嘅技術根本就冇可能趕到 deadline。與其保上呢一班太空人條命，不如做場大龍鳳啦。於是佢哋揾咗一個好隔絕嘅地方，可能係荷里活嘅深山，又或者係神秘嘅美軍基地 Area 51，搭咗一個有月球影嘅攝影棚，再請個好先睇嘅科幻團隊成支地球，上面啲震撼人心嘅畫面拍低之後，扮新聞直播播翻出嚟。喂，等陣先，呢班陰謀論者算老幾啊？乜要我聽你講信 NASA 嗰班專家啊？佢哋係講句要拆解嘅傳統嘅手段嘅知識嘅，要常理已經睇得出，等佢哋轉行嘅有可。阿波羅6次登月任務一共影過差唔多6000張相。為咗方便太空人活動咧 ，NASA 安排特製咗一部相機，可以吸喺太空嘅深海。咁佢唔會好似某啲天氣咁，去月球旅程途中都賴低到亞數。但係問題嚟啦，太空人笠住咁大個頭盔，點樣可以睇到部機嚟緊啲咩？所以好多時候有出事，有啲人開咗風，有啲就爆晒光，或者係直接型嘅，但係都有唔少常識係可以檢確。唔少陰謀論者就好似放大鏡，對呢一批嚟嘅抽絲剝繭，一揾就揾咗好多。
With no weather on Earth, you would expect a spectacular view of space. Yet, there are no stars in the view photographs.
向太空人冇光圈，黑掹掹咁，有乜可能一粒星都睇唔到啊？仲係你哋拍佢嗰張沙流灘，嗰笪黑洞做咩光？呢個疑點咧，好多陰謀論者都有指出嘅。對冇得做咪唔好拍咯，你仲有咩好解釋啊？嗱，其實只要動下腦筋咧，又唔係得啊，係一個客觀嘅解釋嘅。呢張相見到雖然天空好黑，但月球表面同太空人都俾太陽照到好光，所以當時其實係月球嘅日照時間。影開相嘅你應該都試過㗎啦，要喺個光燦燦嘅場景影相，timing一定要夠快，光圈要夠細，吸少啲光先可以避住係白嘅殘光。嗱，有玩開天文攝影嘅都會知㗎啦，要捕捉到星空咧，需要長時間曝光，同埋留好大個光圈先捕捉到太空咁遠咁微弱嘅光圈。所以呢張相咧就影唔到星星啦，相反影到先影得㗎。
Could you actually see the stars in the solar flare in space?
We were never able to see stars on the surface or the daylight side of the moon quite high without looking through the optics.
就連太空人都話，月球表面係光度根本睇唔到任何星星。OK， 當你兜到啦，但係我有證據證明每一張相喺度整廠嘅。睇下呢張相先，呢張影係唔平衡嘅喎。照計你喺月球，太陽係另一個，只有而家雖然風唔光係，個月球都係加埋多咗啲燈打落去。仲有呢張相，明明太空人係企喺陰極位嘅，但係個身因為光，清楚見到晒太空嘅邊緣，實係因為光線用燈照咗落個太空人，會好容易對拍檔。雖然喺呢邊上多咗一集，但又唔係唯一解釋。關於陰影嘅問題咧，其實我哋喺日常生活中都會見到嘅。想想下當時嘅火車頭，當佢延伸到地面嘅方向，會有一個長嘅兩條線行埋一齊。呢個只係簡單講明嘅。如果將 3D 空間會係自然壞嘅，而且呢張相經過鏡頭濾鏡咧，啲鏡有幾花有幾梯都會有咁嘅狀況。我平時同公司同事自拍咧，用光嚟做都會做成成功嘅。加埋月球表面咁多坑同沙石，一個不都有可能係有影射。照呢張相都有簡單嘅解釋嘅。雖然太陽係唯一一個發射光線係唯一一個。
On the moon, not just illuminated by the sun shining towards you and casting a shadow behind you, but there's also a huge area of moon surface.
例如月球表面本身就係一塊大嘅彈光板，唔係嘅話，我哋平時係唔會見到咁光嘅嘢嘅。呢一種光線反射陽光落太空人度，就會令到好似俾人打得咁低咁嘅。會反射陽光嘅仲有太空艙表面。望住呢樣都想象下，太空
空艙附近嘅地下係零射光，所以根本會好尋常嘅。
我批，根本違反常理，你以為自己嘅專有名詞就低到㗎啦咩？你睇埋啲所謂嘅圖表先啦，佢哋簡直係冇用緊觀眾嘅智慧啦。上到前頭，又冇風佢又冇風，邊個解救你啊？一樣要你啊！呢鋪你仲唔斷頸？
支旗會喐呢個論點喺陰謀論者眼中係其中一個主要論點。喺太空環境下指出呢個現象其實都不無道理嘅，除非你肯諗深一層啊。
That flag is on a frame. There is no wind to hold it out like that, of course.
國旗喺月球表面係點樣展開嘅咧？NASA 設計支旗嘅時候，當然係有考慮到月球上面冇風飄唔到啦，所以就喺旗杆上面加條水棍，整到7字咁樣，令國旗冇風都可以打得開，唔會耷落嚟。但要喺月球表面插旗咧，唔係我哋想象中咁簡單，隨手有個窿就得㗎。班太空人咧要用力咁轉支旗入去硬掘掘嘅地面，上面支雷棍咧就一齊揈嚟揈去，連帶支旗都飄嚟飄去。喺插好之後，因為月球真空狀態啊嘛，冇空氣阻力，所以支旗會飛多一陣先熄佢。不過呢一股震盪咧會隨住時間去減弱嘅，過多陣已經靜止，唔會再喐㗎啦。
支旗啊，當你講空啊，咁你又點解釋呢條件啊？有做戲做全套啦，佢哋呢個動作又唔知調，又唔知移，一啲都唔似喺無重力狀態喐動緊。你間太空演員仲冇晒馬腳？
陰謀論者提出，班太空人演員其實只係跳住威啊，周圍跳下跳下，導演就將呢段片較 slow mo 營造同重力效果。實情又係點嘅咧？聽落較 slow mo 好似好簡單嘅，但其實當刻嘅科技水平咧根本就做唔到。拍片嘅概念大家要認識下，其實就好似一次過連拍好多張相，然後播翻出嚟咁解。而家拍片嘅標準多數都係每秒24格啦，即係每秒播24張相咁解。而拍爛鏡就係有2種方法嘅，第一種係事後校拍片，將啲24格攤長咁樣播，例如係每秒淨係播到10格，你就會見到個畫面叻下，好唔自然㗎。第二個方法咧就係真慢鏡，用特製嘅錄影機每秒拍多幾十格，即係幾十張相啦。再用翻平時嘅速度，咁個 slow mo 咧就會 smooth 好多㗎啦。以69年嘅科技咧，叫做真慢鏡得菲林先至可以做到。如果要拍阿波羅登月全程143分鐘嘅片，估計係需要1.5公里長嘅底盤先得。唔單止好難記住，要剪咁大量嘅菲林咧，唔留低任何線索之外，係非常之難。對 NASA 嚟講，直接上月球拍，可能仲唔過搞咁多嘢。覺得太空人動作奇怪，係因為我哋太習慣咗喺地球生活，冇概念究竟喺一個重力只得平時1/6嘅空間喐動係有幾咁艱難。想像你喺呢一個陌生嘅空間啊，仲要着住一件又厚又笨重嘅太空衣，相信都有一段時間先學得識點樣可以保持住平衡咁周圍走。其實陰謀論者憑咩會認為自己好清楚喺月球表面如何喐動先為之自然？呢一點係好值得反思。
快，相同片我當俾你登到啦，我仲有張黃牌係足以證明登月根本就係一場大惡作。
呢張黃牌就係佢啦，范艾倫輻射帶。
The existence of the Earth's radiation belts presents a very serious hazard to future spacecraft.
嗱，呢條帶咧係地球嘅保護罩嚟啊！太陽係經常會對住地球發射好多高能量粒子出嚟，若然中招嘅話咧，我哋就知㗎啦。好在有呢一個圍繞住地球嘅磁場 trap 住由太陽發射出嚟嘅高能量粒子，我哋先至執翻張台嘅啫。可想而知，如果要穿越呢度，會有好勁嘅輻射問題。
喂，太空人要走入呢個地方，唔好玩啦！大家都冇啦，有乜可能穿過2次上完月球就翻返嚟都冇事咧？
嗱，聽嚟好似好有道理咁。正因為佢有道理，揾命搏嘅太空人當然會考慮埋呢一點啦。
NASA claims the astronauts endured only a brief exposure, penetrating the thinnest section of the belts in 1 hour.
呢個范艾倫輻射帶就好似個冬甩咁，中心地方咧輻射最強，外圍就弱啲。所以 NASA 設計嘅飛行航道咧，好巧妙咁避開咗中心地帶。太空人喺太空船嘅保護之下，只係用咗1個鐘頭，好快就經過咗呢一個輻射帶。受到嘅輻射咧，仲少過照 X 光。有人都形容好似行緊火路咁啊！只要喐得夠快咧，就可以喺受傷之前離開啲炭火。
太空係個咁危險嘅地方。
stick to this. This Jackie boy.